Hi everybody, this is Matthew Poes of Poes Acoustics, and I'm going to do, we'll call it a little bit of a memorial. I just read this morning that Quincy Jones passed away on Sunday. So Quincy Jones, to me, is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest names in modern pop music. And interestingly, many of you who know who he is knows that he actually started out in jazz. He himself was a jazz musician, and I believe he played with Lionel Hampton originally. He was a teenager. Got hooked in with him, went to school. I think he was supposed to tour with him as a teenager, and Lionel Hampton's wife wouldn't allow it, if I recall correctly. And so he ended up going to school, he got a degree, went to college. He, I think, was a musical genius, and I think his understanding of production was brilliant. And as a result, it allowed him to do two things that were special in our industry. One was he was able to identify talent that could be worked with and fostered into amazing musicians. And the number of major pop artists he worked with is huge because he was so good at that. The other was that it's not like he was a hands-off producer. He played a big role in helping, so he was considered critical in using session musicians to raise the quality of production. Reality is, if many of you guys have ever gotten to meet some of your musical icons, you'll recognize that in many cases they, and more often than not their bands, are not as talented as the best musicians are. They're creative, they've got a look, there's a reason why they're famous in most cases, but they may not be musically as talented at every individual instrument that needs to be played. So if you've got something that needs to have like a really good piano part, they may have somebody that plays piano, but he's not going to be as good, or she's not going to be as good as the session player. So he brought in these really talented session players. They weren't people who necessarily were good enough to be out on their own, but they were good enough to be able to perform their instrument in that song. And the quality was better than what would have been otherwise possible. It also allows you to layer. So he was really big on layering, and so he would bring in a lot of different musicians and layer it in. He was big on orchestration. So you would take a song that might have been very simple. It might have been just like a piano piece or a little guitar piece, just 2 or 3 parts to it. And then he would layer in full-in orchestra. And he worked with a lot of famous jazz musicians and then later pop and R&B musicians doing this. Aretha Franklin was another person he worked with, and that was a big part of what he did for her, was actually bringing in those orchestrations. And then Michael Jackson, I understand there's some controversy over who he was as a person, but I think that there should be zero controversy over who he was as a musician. He was, in my opinion, one of the greatest musicians that's ever lived in the history of mankind. I have been a huge Michael Jackson fan for my whole life. I've always loved his music. And I think the more you learn about him from a music standpoint, the more you realize just how talented he really was, how much more talented he really was than a lot of his peers, and how amazing his music was. But I think a lot of it wouldn't have been as good as it was had it not been for Quincy Jones. So not only did Quincy Jones recognize the talent in Michael Jackson, but he also recognized how to take that and turn it into something that was above and beyond. So Thriller, Bad, I think most, if not all, of his albums were produced with Quincy Jones, but those 2 albums in particular were so shockingly good and so much better than what was coming out from other artists at the time. And when you looked at what was being done in those musical tracks, it was really astounding. And Quincy Jones didn't just play a small part, he played a huge part in making that stuff what it was. He was best friends with Ray Charles. Ray Charles is another one of, in my opinion, the top musicians that's ever lived. Extremely talented. I don't believe they worked together very much, actually. They may have collaborated a bit, but I think he wasn't a producer for Ray, but they were good friends, and they were about the same age, I believe. Quincy Jones, I believe, was 91 when he passed away, so he lived a long life. There's no getting away from that. But it's still sad to see that he's passed away because he was such a music icon. I remember there was a tribute album done to him, and just looking through all the amazing talent that was on that tribute album, and this was done quite a long time ago, I think 20 years ago. I remember just being shocked at how many amazing, talented artists he worked with and how much they loved him. That's not always true. I think there's been, over the years, a lot of important producers whose music and their role in that music was critical, but at the same time they were hard to work with. He may have been hard to work with. I don't know. I never worked with him, but there was often this sort of love-hate relationship with these guys. Quincy Jones seemed to have been universally loved by the people he worked with. Everybody always had really positive things to say about him, and so I admired him greatly. His contribution was just, I don't even know how to put it into words. And so reading that was shocking. You know, you read about your favorite artists passing away as they've gotten older, and it's always sad, but this one hit me harder because I just think he was so critical to our industry. I think he shaped modern pop music and R&B in a way that no other single person has. And I mean, outside of Michael Jackson, I think his role in R&B is about as big as it gets. He'll be missed, but I know that his legacy will not be forgotten, that music will continue to be produced in a way that utilizes things he contributed, and I don't see us getting away from that anytime soon. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully many of you are as big fans as I am of Quincy Jones. Like I said, I think he was extremely talented. And it's sad to see he went, but as I said, the memory of him will not be gone because his contributions were so critical. Millions and millions of people, of course, have been touched by his talent. So, thanks for watching. More videos coming.